Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode here, The Road to Revolution, Monarchy, Power, and Debt. That's the name of our series. This is episode 3. So far, we have seen how the monarchy plunged more and more into debt and how they created a fictitious monetary policy with these IOUs that were guaranteed by the crown. And we also seen how the end of the reign of Louis XIV brought the situation to have disastrous finances. And we'll move on, and we have a very young Louis XV under the control. We could say the reign is going to be under the control of a regent. So until for the next 8 years, the king will grow up until he'll be able to reign by himself, to mature. And for 8 years, France was under the rule of a regent. His name was the Duke of Orléans, the young king's uncle. During this period, it became painfully clear that the country's finances were in ruins and the situation was dire and something had to be done. But what could be done? One proposal was to declare bankruptcy. It wasn't an unheard of idea. Other kings have taken this drastic step in the past. Declaring bankruptcy meant that the king would simply announce that all his debts were null and void. No one would be paid. The consequences, though, would be tragic. Many would be ruined and plunged into poverty, but it would save the kingdom from total collapse. While officials seriously debated whether to declare bankruptcy, there is a man. A man arrived in Paris, claiming to have the solution. His name was John Law, a Scottish economist from a family of bankers. But Law had a turbulent past. He had killed a man in a duel over a woman. In England, where the law was strict, he was sentenced to death and spent a long time in prison awaiting execution. With the help of skilled lawyers, he managed to have the charge reduced to manslaughter. Since manslaughter allowed for bail, he was released and promptly fled the country. Seeking refuge on the continent, Law turned to publishing economic works, including a treatise that presented strikingly modern ideas. Law thought our system of using money made of gold or silver is absurd. Gold and silver have no inherent value on their own, and their worth is impossible to control. If new gold mines are discovered, the value of gold drops. But if for some reason people hoard it instead of spending it, the value rises. It's all nonsense. We should have paper money instead. His ideas were radical, and also even dangerous. But in a kingdom desperate for answers, they were about to find an audience. In France, the king's promissory notes were already in circulation, but John Law took the idea much further. He argued that metallic currency should be abolished entirely and replaced with paper money, something that would only become a reality centuries later. France abolished gold and silver, as a side note, as official currency with the introduction of the franc in 1795 during the French Revolution. Before this, gold and silver coins were the main form of currency. However, the revolution's financial chaos led to a shift towards paper money, backed by the state. The name of this paper money was called the assignat, and was issued in 1789, where paper notes were tied to the value of confiscated church property. While intended to stabilize the economy, they quickly became inflationary and lost their value. After the collapse of the assignat system, the franc was introduced as a more stable currency, initially based on silver weight. As France's economy stabilized, paper money became more common and gold and silver lost a dominant role, though they continued to be used for trade and wealth storage. To carry out his plan, Law insisted The kingdom needed a central bank to issue and regulate banknotes. The real question was how to guarantee their value. His answer was simple. There is only one true source of wealth in the kingdom: land, real estate. If paper money were backed by land rather than gold and silver, its value could be stable and the economy could expand without being limited by the supply of precious metals. That was Law's idea. At the start of the 18th century, something remarkable was happening. On one side, there were ideas that were extraordinarily modern in their way of thinking. Yet, at the same time, people were still living in a world that had been thinking in a completely different way for millennia. The wealth of the land was central to everything, and so John Law proposed that the king should simply measure all the land in the kingdom. Then, based on the amount of land, they would issue banknotes. Each banknote would represent the value of 1 hectare of land, for example. People would soon understand that the value of these banknotes was fixed and guaranteed. This idea came from John Law, who had fled England to avoid being arrested for manslaughter. After paying for his bail, he managed to escape in typical English fashion. Now, in his new project in hand, with his new project, he was sending it to London. When the English government received the project from this fugitive Scottish murderer, their reaction was predictable. This man is mad. Undeterred, John Law decided to try his luck elsewhere and made his way to Paris. At the time, Paris was under the regency of the Duke of Orléans. As we mentioned, the Duke was a genuinely good person, charming, well-meaning, but he had some flaws. For one, he was incredibly lazy, had no interest in working. Instead, he spent his day indulging in carnal pleasures and excesses, unable to resist orgies, drunkenness, and women. Well, still, he meant well. The Duke had another small flaw. Like many of his time, in a world that was officially deeply Catholic, he was absolutely atheist. He didn't believe in God, and he'd rather enjoy making sure everyone knew it. He thought it made him look like a clever, enlightened person, so he displayed his atheism and blasphemy. What kind of display do you think? What are we talking about? Well, for example, he would schedule his most scandalous orgies on Good Friday, just to make a point, close to Easter. Although he didn't believe in God, the Duke of Orléans had one long-standing obsession. He desperately wanted to summon the devil. He had spent vast sums of money paying conmen and magicians who promised to help him make contact with the dark side. As Saint-Simon put it, he doesn't believe in God, but he does believe in the devil. As a result, he was always surrounded by swindlers and tricksters. This was the man who governed France when John Law arrived in Paris with his project. It was a fitting time for his ideas. Meanwhile, the financial situation in France was disastrous. At the time John Law took charge of France's finances in 1716, the national debt was estimated to be around 2 billion livres, which was roughly 10 times the annual revenue of the French state. This meant that even if France had devoted all of its income to repaying the debt, it would have taken a decade to pay it off without accounting for interest or other expenses. To put that in perspective, in our modern times, the US currency collects about $5 trillion in income taxes annually, and its public debt stands at over 36 trillion, which equals roughly 7 years of income tax revenue. In France's case, it was 10 times their annual income, but John Law had a solution. The Regent authorized him, and he proceeded step by step. His first move was to create a private bank, modestly named the General Bank. This bank began issuing shares and offering substantial dividends to investors. The people were thrilled with the general's dividends and eagerly bought shares in the bank. The Regent, agreeing with John Law, helped by allowing the bank's shares to be accepted by the tax authorities as repayment for taxes. Soon, everyone wanted the shares. They circulated, their price rose, and the bank continued to print more. In return, the bank accepted old promissory notes and old government-issued bills that had been circulating for a long time. Essentially, the public debt began to shrink because the bank was accepting these old debts. So we have seen John Law coming here in France, claiming to have the solution, and in the next episode we're going to find out what will be the result of his policies. With his ideas are to abolish precious metals, because according to him, basically, if a new mine is discovered, gold mine, the price of gold goes down and people hoard it instead of spending it. Therefore, according to him, is not a viable currency for everyday life. And in the next episode, we will see how his economic measures will stand facing the reality. And of course, as always, facing human nature, because we'll see, as always, greed makes its own way in the human heart. This is all for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for following up, and I will see you next time. Bye.